care. I live in virtual reality now. These real objects don't mean anything to me. Smash, smash, smash.
Brad, you look like the kind of guy who likes some virtual reality.
Yeah, is it? I don't know if you can really see on it. You're playing with the Oculus Rift a little bit, before this.
Right around the permanent crease.
I was graffitiing a wall, and I was just saying, it was so engrossing. I was just like totally caught up by this, and then I got a message that something I posted was blown up on Reddit, and I had to come back to the real world. And now I just want to go back to that alleyway and spray paint a wall.
I like how you just said, I got a message, something was blowing up on Reddit. I had to go back to the real world.
Yeah.
This is 2016, folks.
All right. Hello, everyone. This is Close to the Metal. This is our weekly computing podcast where we go in-depth on computing subjects. And today's topic is something we want you to participate in as well. So it is called the Best and Worst of 2016. So I'm your host, Greg Nimbler. Let me just introduce these two really quick, and I'll explain the concept of today's show. To my right,
Brad Burke.
Matt Smith.
And Matt Smith. All right, so Brad and Matt have each compiled a list of 3 of their best and 3 of their worst things in computing in 2016. Now, they shared their list with me, but they do not know what each other put on these. So we're going to kind of go through these one by one.
I'm sure they're all wrong.
I'm sure they're all wrong. That's number one, all wrong. And we're going to go through these kind of one by one, but we're going to bounce back and forth as we get through all the different topics that we've got. But we want your comments. So if you're watching live on YouTube right now, feel free to pop in there and let us know your opinions on this. I'm sure you will think everything's wrong, or if you agree, let us know, and leave those in there, and I'll get through those as we go through the show. Also, if you're listening via podcast, you can always email afterward. So let's kind of go through these one by one as we start off, and I think the first one we'll go to for the best of 2016 from Mr. Matt. It is Microsoft. So Matt, explain why Microsoft is on your list here.
All hail Microsoft. They are our Lord and Savior of computing in 2016. So Microsoft just had a really good year for a couple reasons. One is that Windows 10 is continuing to be awesome, and they released a really nice big update, which and also showed off a upcoming update for next year that looks awesome. With things like HoloLens integration and 3D paint, which sounds silly until you realize you can use it with HoloLens to view your stuff. And also they had the Surface Studio. Let's see. I think that is technically officially out now, which is awesome. It's a great computer. And the Surface Book is also really nice, and they did an update to that. They give it more power. So they're really firing all cylinders this year.
So they do have a lot of stuff that has come out, but I got to ask you about Cortana. Now, that was one of the big things that they touted that they made improvements on. What are your thoughts on that?
I think Cortana is still like most digital assistants, which is you're probably not going to use her unless you go out of use it, because I very much prefer the not give too much identity to these things, despite what they would want you to do.
That's training for our computer overlords, but we know that. Yeah.
Use it, without going out of your way. It's still kind of hard to use Cortana or Siri or even the Google stuff automation without being like, yes, it can do this thing. I'm going to do that.
Brad, let's talk about one of your worst of 2016. That would be Cortana.
So I have a bit of a confession to make. I actually used to use Cortana. When they first implemented in Windows 10, I always have a gaming headset connected to my computer. And so wherever I was in the room, I could say, hey, Cortana, look this thing up. Hey, Cortana. And when it used to have things like, it would use your default browser, they took that away from me. Mm-hmm. They changed the audio settings. They changed the search settings. They changed how she opened programs. Over time, I have gotten so frustrated with Cortana at home that I've stopped using it now. For a while, I was really satisfied with where it was, and I was enjoying the features. And they just sort of keep scaling things back in the name of ease and simplicity, now she only uses Bing and Edge. I wanted her to use Google and Chrome because that's what I use, and now I don't use her search to open anything up anymore. I had a really I'd be doing something, I'd be playing a game. Hey, Cortana, open Spotify. Hey, Cortana, open this. Doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
So
I think that some of the Bing and Edge stuff were not some of the best decisions. Mm-hmm. As far as Cortana goes, I don't really understand why Microsoft quite continues to do some of that, because one of the things that Microsoft has been doing and continues to do really well is they generally are pretty open. about things, and they're like, hey, like you want to use this thing, whatever. Even with like the Windows platform stuff, which has been not that well received, like they are improving it over time and adding new features and expanding it.
We've got a comment in the chat from John who says, I'm a Windows Phone user, so for me, Microsoft has missed the ball completely, basically.
They just need
apps.
like Windows Phone just needs apps.
Matt, though, you're still saying Microsoft ruled this year of 2016.
I don't disagree with that at all. I think Microsoft had a really great year. Great updates to Windows 10. Great hardware coming out. I love the Surface Book with performance base. But like that one thing was just like every time I updated my computer, it was like Cortana got a little worse.
Yeah.
So it was just slowly frustrating.
Okay.
Yeah, digital assistants.
All right.
Still not the greatest thing.
But overall, Microsoft, good job, 2016.
Yep.
Okay. All right, well, let's go on to the next one here. Brad, we'll go to one of your top things for 2016. I don't think this is a surprise to anyone who watches this show. It is the RX 480. The RX 480 you put as one of the top, your favorite things, the best of 2016. Can you explain why?
I think we saw the GTX 1060 come out later in the year, but I think the RX 480 really set a standard for AMD, and it pushed out a product that they had at a price they had been kind of struggling with before, and like they put out this product, it put out great performance at the right price point, and now that it's easily available, I think it's great. I think it supports great, initiatives like DirectX 12, Vulkan, FreeSync, all these open source initiatives. I just really think they knocked it out of the park with that one after kind of a rocky Fury release, and the R9 series. There are some hits in there. I think like people really like the 290 and the 380, but I just think the RX 480 was really a big move for AMD and one that's really helping them out this year. Graphics card to buy, in my opinion.
Okay, all right.
$200.
Matt, any thought on that?
Yeah, the RX 480 is a really good graphics card. They did have a really rocky launch, but it wasn't really their fault as far as like the availability goes, which kind of like it kind of made the launch suck a little bit because they came out and it was like $200 graphics card, can run all your games at 1080p, maybe even 1440p, awesome. And then it was like, actually you can only get it for $250, and we did an entire episode about that sort of shenanigans. And again, that's not AMD's fault because it's the retailers that are marking them up, not AMD. But now that it is lower in price, I think it is more attractive. I recently started using an AMD card in my system at home, swapped out for the Fury X.
Yeah, you have the X.
And I think the big thing for AMD beyond just like the hardware, which, to be clear, the RX 480 hardware-wise is still not as impressive as the GTX 1060.
See, and that's what I was going to ask about too, because we also have those that came out.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about that is they offer pretty comparable performance, but Nvidia is offering it at a lower power draw. Mm-hmm. And so that tells you that hardware-wise, Nvidia still has something of an edge there. But AMD's got some really good features they've been putting out lately. FreeSync's becoming more and more widely available. The drivers are a lot better to use than they used to be. So, yeah, I think that definitely they're kind of on the upswing right now. So
John thinks the Pascal series in general should be on this list.
I mean, I think
no. Matt's said to that one.
I do think that part of the reason, like you were saying about the availability, is that for once I think retailers and people really saw for the first time in a couple generations that they could almost have an Nvidia style release for this AMD card. That they could bump prices, they could throw those extra coolers on, charge a lot, not have a lot of stock available right at the start, which is something that we didn't see from the R9 series for the most part. You could buy a Fury and a Nano pretty readily. But yeah, I think most people spend about $200 on a graphics card. I think AMD was totally right on there that like the 1060 is one of the more popular graphics cards. The 970 was too, like $200-$300.
But RX 480 in particular, that is one of your best.
That's one of my best, at least.
And that's sort of like the Pascal thing is like why I didn't put it on the list as a top is because they had amazingly great performance enhancements in that series, but most people do buy a video card that's $100, $200, and those cards are really like they're good, but like they're not like crazy awesome. They're competitive with the their competitor, which is AMD. Nvidia has, priced them, and performance-wise, the line up there, maybe have a little bit of an edge. So it's kind of hard to be like, well, yeah, the GTX 1080, that's a really awesome card. It's the fastest video card. It's super quick and doesn't use as much power as you might expect, and it's relatively quiet too. But most people aren't using that card.
I'm not sure I'd recommend it to almost anyone who would ask me to help them build a PC. It's not like, unless somebody's just like, oh, I want to throw like $1,500 at my computer, then yeah, maybe. But otherwise, it's overkill. Like, most people we've seen still aren't using 4K screens. I think this is something you and I thought would be, at least I thought would be the case by now, that people would be on these 4K screens. They'd want the 1080 and they'd want, 144 frames per second, and they don't.
Well, so that's the RX 480. That's on Brad's top list. And again, we're going through the best and worst of 2016. According to Matt and Brad, they do not know what each other put down for the best and worst. They're finding out right now. And we want to hear your comments, too. If you're watching on YouTube, let us know what you think about these, if you agree, disagree, or thoughts, whatever. So talking about that, let's go to displays. Matt, on number 2 here on your list, in no particular order, is OLED displays. OLED displays is what you put as one of the best things of 2016.
Yeah, we finally saw them come to laptops. And they are awesome. There's really not any other, there's not really any disadvantage to them, except they perhaps use slightly more power than some of the backlit displays that had previously. But basically, the contrast ratio is way better. Many, many times better, because you can now hit just about a true, black of 0.
Right.
Maybe not quite, but at least with the testing stuff we use, it is. And when you have that, it just makes the picture have so much more of a sense of depth to it. Real life is basically, infinite contrast, or at least as much as your eyes can handle. And that's what gives things their sense of depth and perspective to some degree. You have this really dark room and a really bright room, and, lights coming through a doorway or something. And a backlit display can't handle that, because it can't render that dark part of the image well. The light still bleeds through to it, so it's kind of an inky gray.
Well, John is noting in the chat that they're still as expensive as TVs, which is one drawback to them. But
in the laptops, I don't think they were that much more.
He might be talking about the Dell monitor, which was $5,000. I don't even know if that actually came out. I was bugging Dell about that to be like, what's the deal with it? Is it really available? I haven't seen it, and I never really got a clarification on that. But for laptops, we've seen $200, $250 upgrades, which is expensive, but it's not just about the contrast, though, is the other thing. Also, these displays have really wide color gamuts, and generally, although not always, really solid color accuracy. So they just look great all around. And also, they tend to have very good properties for ghosting, not image retention, because some of them can have a little image retention, but trailing, which gamers don't like. If you have a fast-moving object that's shooting across the screen, a lot of LED screens will have these little trails behind it. Kind of gives it a blur that's not supposed to be there.
Okay, we're going to get into some of that. I do have a quick question here from Random Shear says, what about the Blue Pixel having shorter lifespan issue with the OLEDs? No one likes their display colors shifting over time.
I would say that the real impact of that is probably your guess is as good as mine. That's the kind of thing you can't really sit here and say that you definitely know that it's going to do X, Y, or Z. I know that there's some concerns about that. There's also concerns about image retention, which we did see with OLED displays that we tested. Now it went away, but if you have an image that's on the screen static for even just a few minutes and it's really bright compared to other pixels around it, it can kind of retain itself until you flash another bright different contrast image on there. So they're not perfect, but
but definitely one of your best of 2016.
Yeah.
So if I play Overwatch on it, is the HUD going to get burned in? If I
The
play
HUD?
a lot of Overwatch on an OLED screen, is the HUD going to get like
No,
burned in the corners?
I don't think so. It's image retention that goes away as soon as it flashes a
Okay.
different contrast thing. And like people bring up like these sort of disadvantages with new technology, which may or may not be true, but I mean, you have disadvantages with old technology too. Like LED stuff, one of the big problems that has never been conquered is backlight bleed.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone likes backlight bleed.
Well,
But-
Brad, let's go on to one of your best of 2016, and that is also a monitor, the LG 38U C99.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about that one in juxtaposition of what Matt was just bringing up.
That is sort of the other side, I think, of like premium monitors right now is the ultra wide. And I am like a big proponent of ultra wides. I love them. I think they're great for gaming and movies and productivity and everything. And that one in particular was not a practical monitor, but it was so freaking impressive. Like
Yeah.
it was 4K, like 38-inch ultra. I mean, it was just massive. And playing games on it was hard. Like that's a situation where you actually might need something like a 1080 or 1070 because we had a 980 Ti hooked up to it, and it was kind of struggling sometimes to keep that frame rate up. So, it takes some heft to lift a screen like that, and it was also like $1,500.
Yeah.
But it was just so cool that if you were just going to drop, if money was no object and you were going to buy a monitor, like that's the one I would buy hands down. So,
Okay. So you would
Yeah.
go with that.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome monitor. It's kind of like the, I don't know, the best of the old guard of technology. You know, eventually we're going to kind of switch over to OLEDs for most displays, I would imagine. But, here is this curved, ultra-wide monitor that, the contrast wasn't that amazing. Like, in some respects, it wasn't that great from a technical perspective, but it just took everything to the max. As far as like just the size of the presentation and the pixel count, and yeah, it's hard to deny. Like you play games on that thing, it's awesome. And also this year, I didn't put this on my list, but this year is the year that like convinced me ultra wides are like cool.
Yeah.
Like I was a little skeptical about them before, but yeah, they definitely are the way to go for some purposes.
I think
Like,
it's no secret that Brad loves ultra
Yeah,
wides
yeah.
too. If
Well-
you watch this show, he does not make it a secret.
I think it's helped even in the past year that a lot of, as the screens become more popular, a lot of games and a lot of content places are saying, well, okay, we're going to start serving up content in the 21:9 form factor. And
Yeah.
like even this year, there were older games getting updates to allow them to run at 21:9 because that's something that people wanted. And YouTube actually just added a 21:9 mode that fills the screen. That's pretty cool. So.
yeah.
All right, well, there we go. One of Brad's best of 2016, the LG 38U C99 monitor. All right, Matt, let's go to one of your best of 2016, kind of your last one here on the list, and this is a subject of one of our shows recently here for Close to the Metal, and it is 2-in-1s don't suck anymore. Is your proclamation. So let's talk about that, because 2-in-1s do seem to have made kind of a comeback. Or, I don't know if a comeback's the right word, but
No, not really comeback.
not really comeback.
They
They've
weren't
arrived.
there.
Yeah, they've arrived.
Yeah, I mean, 2-in-1s used to be like this compromise where it was like really actually being a 2-in-1 actually kind of added more heft to it because the touchscreen required more thickness and more heft, and the hinge design was always like could be kind of awkward. But now like you can get systems like the HP Spectre X360 that is just like it's a laptop that's a really nice laptop and also a 2-in-1 that turns into a tablet when you want it to, and there's like no real disadvantage to that. And I think we've kind of scoffed at 2-in-1s like over time, but it's also been true that as things got thinner and lighter and more powerful, that eventually they would reach a point where they would become viable, and it looks like we're starting to hit that point where the hardware's come far enough that we can get fast processors into these small form factors. The touchscreens are thinner, they're lighter. So yeah, I think going forward we're going to see a lot more of these competitive 2-in-1s, and probably next year we'll see them start to come down in price too, so that you can get them at fairly reasonable sums.
All right, so 2-in-1s, definitely something that you were saying best of 2016.
Yeah.
For all the innovations and where they've come from. All right, Brad, so we're going to start bouncing through these here. Brad, let's get to your final one here for the best before we get to the worst of 2016, which you have to have that if you're going to have the best. Brad, your best of 2016, the Alienware Alpha R2.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, yeah, I thought this would be a surprise. I was going back through my reviews from this year, and I was sort of looking at the different products I had hands-on time with, and I remembered the Alpha R2. I think having the idea of like a console or smaller-sized PC gaming box has always been a really appealing one to people who do play on PC. And Alpha, the first time, kind of struggled with it because I think those people, like the Alpha is sort of a second system for people, and they wanted to know what was inside. And for them to just sort of be like, well, it's a GTX, you like GTX, right? That's good. It's one of those. Oh yeah, but what is it? And when they put that 960 in there, you got to have an SSD. Like, that's the only thing is that, like, you get the one with the SSD because don't buy a mechanical hard drive in 2016 or 2017.
Yeah.
But, the performance was great. It was compact. The price was good. Just right out of the box. And they ditched SteamOS, which I appreciated because SteamOS was kind of a misstep as well.
So I have a story about that, which I told Brad, I believe. But a few weeks ago, I was looking around my basement for some cords that I needed, and I looked in the box, and there was an Alienware Alpha in the box, laying upside down, and which was very confusing to me because I also use an Alienware Alpha at home, and I was like, wait, like I thought this was upstairs. What is this? And I take it out. And I'm like, oh yeah, this is the one that had SteamOS on it. That's kind of useless, so I put it back in the box where it still resides. But now you have Windows on it, and I'm not sure if they still do the SteamOS one. Did they actually discontinue that?
I don't think they offer it anymore.
Yeah.
But I mean, you can download it yourself and install it if you want.
I don't know why you would want to.
Yeah, you'll get worse performance, but yeah.
So the Alien Alpha R2 is Alienware Alpha R2. It's essentially a portable desktop gaming system.
It's a very small desktop.
Okay.
It's like got a GTX 960 and an i5 in a little.
It's probably like
box
10 inches by 10 inches and about 3 or 4 inches thick.
Okay.
It's basically a gaming PC console.
So that is one of Brad's best of. And again, if you're watching on YouTube, feel free to chime in with your comments. I see some different things here. I would say HP has done really well with their computing products, and a few other questions in there and comments, so feel free to put those in there. Keeping on the gaming side, let's go to one of Matt's worst of 2016, and that is stagnant gaming laptops. Gaming laptops in general.
Yeah, it's not that the gaming laptops are particularly bad this year, but I do have to say that I didn't see as much advancement out of them as I would have had hoped for. And there's I think a few reasons for this. One is that we didn't really get a new Intel quad-core processor option to put in this year. Another is that, there was a lot of optimism when Nvidia came out with Pascal about how that was going to make the performance way better in laptops too, because they're more power efficient than their predecessors. But I gotta say that based on the laptops we've been getting, I mean, what we've been seeing sometimes with, like, say, a Razer Blade is that the companies have actually downgraded back from, like, a 970M to, like, a 1060.
Well, and I was going to say that this is actually the way NVIDIA intended it to happen.
Yeah.
Was that they sort of staged it as, like, the previous generation, if you got that big, thick gaming laptop, it had a desktop 980, and if it was sort of the highest end mobile, it was a 980M. And now the 980 is supposed to be, or the 980, the 1060 is supposed to be what the 970M was.
Because they don't have M
was the 980
anymore.
Yeah.
They don't have the M class anymore. It's just 1060. And technically, from what we've seen, the mobile ones are actually still a little bit slower than their desktop counterparts. But, the idea was they don't want the confusion of the mobile one and the desktop one anymore. But in some situations, it seems like that results in there not being much of a performance increase because the company's like, oh, well, we have to downgrade now to a 1060 because we can't quite fit in a 1070. And also, as a result of all of this, the designs haven't really changed. Like, the laptops that we have right now, that are gaming laptops, all like pretty much look the same as the ones that we had at the end of 2015. Like there's been little tweaks, but
overall,
yeah, and
much
that
improvement.
kind of was disappointing because I was hoping we would see more of the thinner, lighter ones. Recently, we had an Alienware 13, which is a new design, but it's got a 1060, but it's actually like really like thick and rather heavy. And the Acer Predator 15, which we really like, we just reviewed that. That's a really good gaming laptop, but at the same time, it's a 15-inch laptop that's like 8 pounds or something like that, and that's where most of those laptops are still.
Yeah, they're still heavy, so not a whole lot of improvement in those.
Yeah.
So on the worst of 2016 list for Matt. All right, let's bounce to our next one here, and I see some other people putting in their worst of 2016. We'll read off some of those too. So we've got Brad. You'd mentioned this already, but mechanical hard drives in general.
Can't be putting mechanical hard drives in computers. I'm
No.
gonna say it right now. 2017, I think any computer we get with a mechanical hard drive alone is like gonna run into problems because it's just so slow. Like we were even talking earlier about like trying to load Oculus on a system that has a mechanical drive, and it was like the climb took like a minute and a half to load into the main menu. I mean, it's just you can't do it. Like SSDs, the prices have come down so much this year. You can get for under $100, you can get a 256 gigabyte SSD. Just do it. Put it in your desktop, put it in your laptop. I don't care. Stop using mechanical drives except for data storage.
Yeah, mechanical drives suck.
Just
like it's just it's terrible, and you know, it's okay to use like a solid state hybrid drive with like some cache there to increase the speed, but to just have like a straight up mechanical drive is just like it's not a good experience anymore. And I know why companies do it is because it lets them like fit in higher spec things otherwise. Like they can put in the mechanical drive and then they can upgrade the video card, and you know, someone that unfortunately doesn't know any better is going to come along and be like, whoa, this has a better video card, I'm buying that one.
Yeah.
So you know, to manufacturers, like, this is a warning: if you send us a system with a mechanical hard drive, you're pretty much going to lose like probably 2 points off your score automatically.
Damn.
Just for that.
Okay.
Like that's because it's going to be too slow. It's going to make the experience suck. And this is, you know, a warning to consumers. If you see a mechanical hard drive in anything other than like, you know, a really cheap desktop or a really cheap laptop, like just don't buy it. You know, or at least plan to upgrade it after you buy it. If you know, if you feel like doing that, because you can buy cheap solid state drives.
And that's the thing is, a year ago, I wouldn't have said that. I would have said like there's an economical reason for choosing a mechanical drive. But at this point, like I was shopping SSDs the other day, and it's so cheap. Like for the cost of a terabyte, you know, a terabyte mechanical drive is going to cost you maybe a manufacturer a lot less because they've got tons of them, but it's going to cost you as a consumer $60 to $80. And that's what a 256 gig, you know, SSD is going to cost. So just buy the SSD.
So no mechanical, just in case there was any confusion on your guys' stance on mechanical hard drives, that was a no.
They're great for data
No.
storage. If you need to store a lot of data, absolutely.
All right, so no on the mechanical hard drives. Got just a couple of things left for the worst of 2016 side of it. John in the chat wrote some of his worst. Wearables, Pebble being bought by Fitbit, Moto 360 being delayed, Microsoft Band 3 not coming. Those are some of his worst of 2016. So feel free to put yours in there too.
I don't care about those dinky little things with ARM processors.
With a computer with the big ones.
Like, what are you?
We're going to have to start caring about ARM soon. But
what is this? Can you play Doom on this Microsoft Band 3?
Yeah.
I don't.
All right, so Matt disagrees. All right, so Matt, another thing on your worst of 2016 is, I'm just going to read what you said here. Exploits run amok. So what do you mean by that?
Yes, exploits are everywhere. And actually, I'm going to just violate my own rule a little bit because this is going, the thing I just said, this goes a little bit outside just PCs themselves, but kind of the whole ecosystem of things connected to the internet. And it does end up ultimately affecting PCs. Like we have all these exploits in not necessarily just PCs, but Internet of Things devices, routers, you know, all these different things you're going to use or connect to your PC. And they're being harnessed in some really bad ways. And you know, we can go into like stuff about like the political campaign hacks or people like the rotating cast of celebrities getting their like nudies leaked online.
Krebs.
But yeah, Krebs is the thing that really solidified it. I think the reason I put this on the list more than anything else is that Krebs on security, very well-known researcher of security, had his website taken down by a denial of service attack. That was like the biggest, I think, at the time, and it was like
It'll be like a week later, but yeah.
yeah, and then a week later it was even bigger, but it was like 640 gigabytes per second or something like that.
Right,
Huge
that was
amount
just
of
bombarding
bandwidth,
it.
and it all happened because all of these individual like little devices that had these backdoors, default passwords that were like terrible, that had been discovered, all together they sent out through a botnet traffic to the site, and they took it down. And he had a company that was supposed to safeguard him against this, but after like a day, they were like, actually, this is totally uneconomical for us to do this, so you're on your own. And his website was down for like a week. And eventually Google picked him up, but it's like you can use these denial of service attacks to basically silence people.
For all of these Internet of Things devices, if we
yeah.
can get into them, yeah.
And I think it's not just scary that like this stuff is out there and that people are using it for these things, but that it's clear that we're totally not prepared to deal with it. Like you were saying,
not
like
at all.
like his current DDoS protection, like basically he ran up his like insurance almost immediately. He went to a bunch of people offered to step in, including Akamai, which is one of the biggest CDNs out there. And he said they were only with him for like 48 hours before even they were like, we can't do this.
Those are companies that are specifically, like they offer services specifically to prevent these attacks. And they're the biggest, companies out there on internet. Like they work with the backbone of the internet, and they're like,
they can't do anything about it.
sorry, like
Yeah.
this isn't economical for us. We can't do this. We can't protect you.
That is a pretty scary prospect because that's only going to happen more and more and more as pretty much everything becomes connected to the internet.
Right.
The opportunities for getting in there, if a company doesn't develop some, like you said, some really, really good backdoor passwords or all kinds of different situations they need to protect from, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, probably.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, but so exploits run amok, that is one of Matt's worst of 2016. Let's go to the final one here. And again, we do want to hear your comments on these. You two kind of tie in on this a little bit. Matt, you wrote, Apple doesn't rule. That was
Yes.
one of your final things for 2016.
Yep, Apple does not rule. So I think actually what really I'm going to talk about the MacBook in particular, but what really crystallized this for me was that like yesterday, Apple came out with Mac OS 10.12.2, and one of the features of this is that there's been some complaints about the battery life of the new MacBook Pro. So what they've done is they've disabled the battery life estimate so that you can no longer see how long the battery is estimated to last. That way, you don't have to worry about it, and you can just blissfully use your Mac and still it goes dead.
It's like Vegas removing clocks from the casino. So don't worry about it anymore. You don't need to know what time it is.
Exactly. It would be one thing if like they just released MacBook Pros that had the same size battery or a bigger battery, but they just released MacBook Pros that have substantially smaller batteries in terms of the capacity they can take than the previous models, and which in our testing suffered for that. And it just looks like a huge, like, basically them saying like, we're not going to actually fix the problem. We're just going to like make sure you can't see it so well.
Well, and let's say, Brad, your other worst of 2016 too, just to jump in there with that, is the MacBook Pro.
I think
specifically.
I think Apple had a chance there to save it. That they waited so long for an update, and I know so many people who the MacBook Pro is just their computer of choice, regardless of what I say about Dells or HPs. It's no, I want a MacBook Pro, and I get that people want to do their thing, but yeah, that's what an Apple user sounds. But the new MacBook Pro, like they took everything that was good about it and that those people really liked. Like the people who I know who use them, they're creatives, they do music, they do like video stuff, and they want something they can tinker with, they can plug everything into, they can, like bring with them and have great battery life no matter what they're doing. And I think that was the place where the MacBook Pro really excelled. And it just seems like they really didn't get that. And they were like, well, Thunderbolt 3. And it's like, yeah, those people aren't. And like eventually, I was saying when this came out that like Thunderbolt 3 is going to be great for creatives and musicians and producers and things like that because it's a really high bandwidth connection. And when your equipment starts using it, which is going to be a few years down the road, it's going to be super great. But it's just not the computer that those people want right now. And I think the same thing about the touch bar. I think if you would put that on the MacBook and you say, like, this is just for people who need a computer to do whatever, my dad would love the touch bar. It shows him exactly where the things are, and he can just touch the, for someone like him, but he's not buying a MacBook Pro, he's buying a MacBook.
Yeah.
And I think instead you need to, they needed to focus in and say, like, the MacBook is our entry-level computer, and the Pro is for our power users, and we're going to address them as such. Yeah. And they did not do that at all.
And also, I want to bring up, like, the MacBook, Apple's still selling the MacBook Air without like any changes, right? Like,
do not buy a mechanical hard drive in 2017. Do not buy a MacBook Air in 2017. Do not buy that computer.
And it's just ridiculous because the MacBook Air is, like a lot of people use them. Actually, like we had this pushback from some of our colleagues. Were like, oh, I have a MacBook Air and it's fine. And it's like, well, yeah, that's because you haven't used anything else lately. Like the MacBook Air has a nice keyboard and it has a nice chassis and it's okay to look at, but like other than that, it's like slower than its competition. The display is awful compared to any of it thing that's even remotely in the same price. The battery life is no longer like that much more impressive. It's about on par, and it's really quite expensive still. And Apple still lets people buy it.
Well, I mean, if people are going to give you money, I mean, are you going to stop them from doing that?
Apple's supposed to be the company that's like, we're about design. And I feel like they, for a long time, especially, under Steve Jobs coming back, got that where eventually, they'd be like, okay, like we're going to discontinue that. That's no longer any good. But just, you have this like error hanging on the zombie computer, not getting updated. Mm-hmm. And yeah, Apple is exactly. It feels really cynical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They're like, people will pay us for this, so we're going to keep making it, and we're not going to update it, and you're not going to know any better, so hey, just give us your money.
It's going to be the retro iPods on sale next year.
I would buy that.
It's just
if it had a click wheel, I would buy it.
Yeah.
All right. See, maybe that would work then. Okay, so Apple in general, though. Apple in general.
I like the iPhone 7 Plus or whatever this is.
So that one's good.
I bought one.
But
it's
Apple
nice.
overall fails for you, and the MacBook Pro in particular. For Brad.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's kind of, I think we're kind of out of time to talk about these, but this discussion should continue on the website. So go to digitaltrends.com where this post will be, or on YouTube, or you can always email. Let us know in the comments your best and worst of 2016, whether you agree or disagree or something completely different. We want to hear what all of them are. And you can always email podcast@digitaltrends.com too. We've had shows on pretty much every one of these subjects in the past. So go and take a look at the archives of Close to the Metal on YouTube, or, like I said, podcasts, wherever you can find podcasts, we will be there, and you can check those out too. All right, thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in. So we're going to be live next week on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, right here from DT headquarters. This was the best and worst of 2016. We'll be back next week with another episode.